Dave, that's a nice tie you got there.
Thank you. I try.
Is it? What's it made of? It's got to be silk. Is it like real silk or is
It's
it like?
Shockingly not a clip-on. That's the best I can.
It's not a clip-on. That's good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
I tied it myself even.
Exactly. It's
almost
great.
An adult.
Almost. I know that's like one of those things that I feel like once you know how to do it, it's like riding a bike. You never really forget how to do it.
Yeah.
So.
But it's not an easy thing to learn either.
No,
I don't think.
No.
Yeah. Hey everyone. My name's Anthony. I'm a corporate guide here at Northwest Registered Agent, and I've been here for about 3 years. And today I have the pleasure of sitting down with some experts when we're talking about the Corporate Transparency Act. First, we have Dave, who is our legal expert, and then we have Shawndale, who is our filings guru. So we're going to kind of go through some things centered around the Corporate Transparency Act. We're going to talk about why the Corporate Transparency Act exists. We're going to chat about how the BOI rollout has gone so far. And then we're also going to break down some key terms with the Corporate Transparency Act. What's great about this, if you have a question, we are live. So go ahead and throw that question in the chat and we'll be kind of taking questions throughout the live stream. So as we start, I just want to start with talking with Dave and asking you a question, Dave. Let's look at the Corporate Transparency Act and why was it passed and what exactly are they looking for with this act?
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. So the Corporate Transparency Act was really passed kind of in response to the Panama Papers being published in 2016. What that was, it was a series of investigative journalist reports and data leaks that exposed offshore companies, tax evasion, money laundering, basically a bunch of entities being formed overseas that controlled assets from all over the world that were being used to basically just launder money. So after that, there was a global push for corporate transparency, which is basically who owns and benefits from every company. The European Union really led the charge. They passed legislation shortly after the Panama Papers were published. And then the U.S. followed suit in 2021, passing the Corporate Transparency Act, which just went into effect January 1st of 2024. And under the Corporate Transparency Act, entities must report their beneficial ownership to FinCEN. And it's really targeted at stopping money laundering, financial crimes, just different things that would take advantage of the U.S. economic system. And it really seeks to punish these willful violations. So if you're intentionally hiding who is benefiting monetarily from your company, that's what the Corporate Transparency Act is targeted or trying to prevent.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And as you were talking, we had a question come in. So, Dave, I'm going to direct this one to you. It says, "Hi, I have a single member LLC in Texas. I live and work at my home in Dallas. My business address now is a virtual address with Northwest Registered Agent in Austin. Which address should I use for the BOI reporting company address?"
Since you are a U.S. resident with a U.S. company, you're best off listing that residential address. Now, when you report to FinCEN, this data is not publicly available. So while Northwest does allow you to use our address as, say, your principal office address for like state reporting purposes, like when you formed your company in Texas, that information is public, right? So you probably want to keep a residential address private on a publicly viewable state website. Because the FinCEN database that holds all this BOI information is private and very secure, there's really no issue in terms of your privacy reporting that residential address. So I probably would recommend that.
Okay.
And I believe since you are a U.S. resident, I think FinCEN also requires that, not just a recommendation.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. You said FinCEN a couple of times. Do you mind breaking down what FinCEN actually is?
Yes, absolutely. So FinCEN is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This is a government agency that is part of the Department of Treasury. Most people have probably never heard of FinCEN. Really, before the Corporate Transparency Act, I'd never heard of them. Prior to the Corporate Transparency Act, they would monitor and police the Bank Secrecy Act. So if you are in the banking industry, you may have some familiarity with that. The Bank Secrecy Act has been in place since 1970, also designed to protect the U.S. financial system from money laundering and illicit crimes. So FinCEN's been around for a while, and their main objective is just protect the financial system of the U.S.
Okay. And Dave, we actually had a follow-up question for the original question.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you. And to piggyback off my question, can I use my apartment address as a residential address?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, sweet. Shawndale, we had another question come in. Who has to file the BOI report?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's really anyone who has a company created in the United States will be required to file the report. There is a small amount of like excluded companies for various reasons that we'll touch on later.
Okay, thank you, Shawndale. Dave, I'm going to come back to you. So when you say financial crimes, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. So FinCEN, they've tried to raise public awareness for the Corporate Transparency Act and its reporting requirements by doing a lot of public engagements, public speaking. And each time they do, they try to highlight a specific financial crime that has either been in the news or kind of the basis for why the Corporate Transparency Act passed in the first place. Usually these deal with, like, I guess, examples. One, it was a U.S. resident who formed a gambling site that was based in Costa Rica. This is prior to most states legalizing like sports gambling. So this is still when gambling was primarily legal in the U.S. So what that would happen, the money would go to the Costa Rican entity, and then he set up a series of shell companies and used aliases to basically hide that money funneling back into him in the U.S. Another instance involved a Chicago-based flooring company creating a shell company for consulting services. And they used to basically put a bunch of kickback money that would go to a flooring manufacturer, and this was just to make sure that they receive favorable bids and just elicit kickbacks. And another was a Texas-based oil company that was bribing Mexican officials in the Mexican government through a series of shell companies. So it's just depends. I mean, there's a lot of different financial crimes. The ones FinCEN is highlighted usually are using some corporate structure and aliases to basically hide just the channels where money is flowing.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So before we had another question come in, but I want to elaborate on something really quick. You said shell company quite a bit. How do shell companies exist in the first place?
Well, the important thing to know about a shell company is it's not inherently illegal. Shell companies can be used for a variety of things. For example, if you want to, as we touched on with that first question, maintaining privacy, if you want to keep some of your information off a publicly viewable state record, you may form a shell company as basically a proxy between you and the entity actually doing business to kind of just keep your information safe and secure. The problem with the shell companies I mentioned in those examples were there was a string of them. So it's intentionally hiding information. Use of aliases was also done in a lot of these examples. So it's basically an entity that has zero assets, does zero business, and in the illicit means is used to basically funnel money for illegal purposes.
I wanted to add a little on that too, Dave. Many businesses will list their registered agent address in place of their home address from appearing on the public records. In fact, that's a service that Northwest offers to its clients in most states, with the exceptions of states that just don't allow the registered agent address to be used. The point of the BOI report is to gather data regarding the beneficial owners of the companies through collections of identifiers, including pictures of a valid ID and addresses. But similar to other federal filings, this information is not made public, but with a valid court order or a consent of the entity, it can be shared with various law enforcement branches if illegal activity is suspected.
Okay. Thank you both. Great information so far. And while you both were talking, we actually had a couple more questions come in. So I'll throw it out there, and whoever wants to touch on it, both of you want to do that, go ahead. But the first question is, I live in the UK operating a company in Delaware with a virtual office in Texas. I suppose this is similar to the question we had earlier, but should I use my Texas VA or my UK home address on the BOI report?
I'll take that if you don't mind, Shawndale. So the reporting requirements, because you're based in the UK, So based off how that question was worded, I'm assuming you live in the UK, you operate a business based in Delaware. For residential reporting requirements, you can list your UK address. For the business's US-based address, every entity that is filing with FinCEN has to list a US address. If you don't have a physical place of business in the US, FinCEN has said that you may list your registered agent's address or any physical location you are maybe not running an office out of, but doing business from. So I think really based off the information you provided, you kind of have your choice of a few different addresses you could list in the US.
All right, thanks. And another question that we had come in, and I think, Dave, you and I were talking about this a little bit the other day, but the question is, does anyone have an idea on what the new administration will do when they take office? Like maybe does this law go away? I feel like I know what your answer is, Dave, but go ahead and take it.
Well, get ready to hear this basically for the remainder of this YouTube. It depends. That's like the stock legal answer for everything. And when you're dealing with a new administration, really, it's anyone's guess. Now, they have the Trump administration. I mean, obviously, it doesn't take office until January, but they have said they plan to do a lot of cuts to federal agencies. So would FinCEN be one of these agencies that are potentially on the chopping block? It's entirely possible. Now, the important thing to remember is the Corporate Transparency Act actually survived President Trump's initial veto and then was passed by Congress. So it does have bipartisan support. At least it did. Now, since it was initially passed in, I think it was first introduced in, I want to say 2019. That might not be accurate, but it did pass in 2021. It has lost most of that bipartisan support since then. There's been several Republican congressmen that have either tried to hold off the Corporate Transparency Act or outright repeal it. You're seeing a lot of pushback from states. There's currently a lawsuit regarding the Corporate Transparency Act that is under appeal right now. They'll maybe eventually be heard by the Supreme Court. I forget what district, which court struck down it as unconstitutional as it applies to if you're a member of the National Small Business Association. Currently, you don't have to file a BOI report because they deemed it was unconstitutional to members of that group. So new administration, really hard to say. Again, it just depends. But given his directive of wanting to slash federal bloat, basically, I wouldn't be shocked, but I would still report just in case.
All right. Thanks, Dave. So, Shawndale, the BOI report, there's a lot of terminology in there that may be foreign to someone that hasn't seen this terminology. There's a lot of different key terms that are really important when it comes to filing this report. Do you mind going through some of those key terms?
Sure. One of the key terms is the beneficial owner, which is someone who owns 25% or more ownership or has substantial control. Substantial control is anyone who is able to make important decisions on behalf of the entity. That could be someone like the CFO.
Another key term that FinCEN's tried to elaborate on, but still a bit amorphous, is the company applicant. Basically, what this individual would be whoever submitted the paperwork that filed your entity and the individual that directed that filing. So at most, you'll have two company applicants. At least you'll have one. Both have to be an individual. And FinCEN just wants to know who was in charge of basically the catalyst that formed the business and who actually did the physical filing with the state authority.
I think to add a little on that too with the company applicant, something that we see questions a lot is if you are an existing company, so you were filed before January 1st of this current year, a company applicant isn't required. You only just have to report the beneficial owners. So that is a question we see quite often.
All right. And as you all were talking about the company applicant, we actually had a question come in. If Northwest started my company, are you guys my company applicant?
Generally, the answer here is no. As FinCEN has said, the incorporator or organizer of an entity is really not indicative of who the company applicant actually is. And if you go through a corporate service provider like Northwest, it kind of depends on internal operations. We tend to utilize online tools and software that remove the personal involvement of individual employees. And FinCEN has said if individual employees are not involved based off use of such software, they wouldn't be considered a company applicant. So because of how Northwest processes your business formations, generally, no, we are not a company applicant, or our individual employees would not be company applicants.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Shawndale, I got a question for you. Obviously, this rollout there's been changes to dates, deadlines, everything like that, but up to now, how has this filing gone so far?
So far, it's been smooth. I mean, there are many changes, like you said, that have come up. Originally, when this came about, they were saying any company had to file that was formed this year had to file within 30 days. Later, they extended that to 90 days, which is where it currently sits. So anyone who files their company in this year, 2024, will have to file a BOI report. If your company was filed before January 1st of 2024 and you're considered an existing company, you have until the end of the year. So December 31st is your deadline to file that report.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out right there, because obviously we're approaching the end of the year, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers probably fall into that category of having formed their company prior to 1 January 2024. So just something to be on the lookout for is we're coming close to the deadline. So awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see. Okay, so I had a question just come in actually. What happens if I file this late? Is there some kind of penalty with that, or kind of can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. And unfortunately, it kind of depends. The stated penalties are $591 per day you fail to file, up to $10,000. And you can also face criminal penalties of up to 2 years in jail. Now, FinCEN has said repeatedly that they're not trying to basically gotcha to small business owners that so many people are still unaware of the Corporate Transparency Act. So it's not like some cash grab by the U.S. government to just find people that are trying to comply or just generally unaware. They're going after people that are willfully not filing this. So you need to do it, and you're trying to hide who is actually benefiting from your company. That said, FinCEN has not seen the numbers of reporting that they expected. So policing, we'll see how it goes. But to date, I have not heard of any actual enforcement actions. But you're still in your best interest to file.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. And as you were speaking, we had another question come in. The question is, if my company is registered in multiple states, do I have to file this in multiple states?
Well, you guessed it. The answer is it depends. Really just depends how your company's structured. So for the most part, you only need to file one. So if you formed a company in, say, California initially, and then you branched out across the country and you filed in, let's say, 5 other states, you registered to do business, not a new company filing, but you registered that same entity, probably only need to file that single BOI report. Now, let's say that you're providing a professional service that maybe in California you have to form a corporation for, but in Washington State you have to be an LLC for. So maybe you needed to file a new domestic entity. Now, depending on how you're structured, that may necessitate a new BOI report. So again, really just depends on internal structure.
Okay. So we have a couple questions coming in. So the first one, like I did before, whoever wants to take it, by all means. So the first question, what address do I list if I live outside the country? Do I list my virtual office address or registered agent address?
That's a great question. And really, it's a question we encounter a lot since we have a lot of clients that live outside of the U.S. On the BOI report, your business address must be in the United States. If you don't have a physical location in the U.S., you're welcome to use your registered agent address. However, when you list your address for the initial beneficial owner and company applicant, you will need to use your resident address as it appears on your ID, even if that address is outside of the United States.
Okay, and I think you kind of answered this already, Shawndale, with that description, but the next question was, can I list my registered agent address if my company is based in the United States?
Technically, no. You would need to use your own physical business location.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question that came in. I dissolved my company after 90 days. Do I have to file the BOI report?
It depends. So when did the dissolution occur, and was it a voluntary dissolution, or did the state do it for you for something like failing to file your annual report? So if you properly dissolved your entity prior to January 1st of 2024, like you filed the dissolution paperwork with the pertinent Secretary of State, you wound up the affairs of the entity, then you would not be required to file a BOI report. If you were an active entity as of January 1st of 2024, even if you filed the dissolution paperwork that day, you are still technically required to file your BOI report. Now, if you were administratively dissolved by a state, Secretary of State office or other government authority, regardless, prior to after January 1st of 2024, you are still required to file your BOI report.
Okay, thank you. So as I'm listening to both of you speak, I think from a business owner standpoint, this is something that is new for everyone, right? Like this is something that everybody's kind of navigating through and can seem, I guess, daunting because the unknown is a little bit nerve-wracking. What would be your piece of advice to like put business owners at ease as far as this report is concerned? I mean, what like Dave, you talk about it a lot as far as like they're looking for bad actors. They're looking for people that are like willfully trying to break the law. So if you're the business owner out there watching this and you open your mom and pop business and you're kind of nervous about this BOI report, what is some advice you could give to put these people at ease?
I mean, I've personally filed a BOI report. It's extremely painless. I mean, it takes just a few minutes. It took me longer to, there's a megabyte limitation on the upload of your ID. It took me longer to compress the file than it did to file the report. It's really simple. Now I will say it is predominantly online. So if you're not tech savvy, I mean, some small businesses might not be like with that, then it's better to hire like an outside service like Northwest to probably process it. But the filing itself, it's really painless. I'd say the biggest concern is likely your personal data and privacy. It is maintained on a very secure private server. Probably the bigger issue are these larger reporting companies that don't fall into an exemption, that maybe have a lot of different beneficial owners that they can't just name off the top of your head. But smaller like LLCs that maybe just a couple family members started, the reporting requirements should be pretty minimal.
Okay. Shawndale, do you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to add the biggest concern I think people would have would be privacy, which what Dave already covered. So.
Okay, awesome. Shawndale, we had a question come in while Dave was speaking. If using a registered agent address and that address receives my mail, how do I get the mail?
It would, any mail that was received at a virtual office, or even if Northwest is providing an address for you, that mail would be scanned and uploaded into your account unless you have a different arrangement with the mail provider that you use.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Shawndale. Another question. So you talked a bit about applicant and beneficial owner. Who is my beneficial owner if another entity owns my company?
That's a great question. So I kind of alluded to this, but maybe didn't say it explicitly, but everything needs to be an individual. So if your company is owned by another company, who is the individual that ultimately benefits from that company? Everything reported to FinCEN needs to, whatever the trail is, has to end in a living, breathing person.
All right, that's good. That's a good way to break it down. Question for you, Shawndale. Do I need a FinCEN ID?
That's a great question. And technically, no, you don't. It's not required, but there are benefits to it. So if you're a company who could potentially file multiple reports due to constant company changes, like ownership change, you move your location and whatnot, having a FinCEN ID for the company makes sense because it would be make the filing a little easier to process. And same thing with if you're an individual. If you're an individual who is a beneficial owner of multiple companies or company applicant for multiple companies, getting an individual FinCEN ID makes your filing process easier is you don't have to upload your proof of ID and other necessary information that you do without that.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in, my home address and my mailing address to where I get personal stuff is different. Would that be a problem?
No, that wouldn't be a problem. You would just list the address that's located on your ID for the individual when you're filling out the beneficial owner and company applicant information.
Okay. So another question. So what does that mean that the mail would be scanned and uploaded to my, here's the question. What does that mean that the mail would be scanned and uploaded to my account? Are you saying that I can log into my account and see that mail was received there? I think that's in regards to the using the virtual office. I don't know who wants to elaborate on that.
Well, I guess that's a follow-up to the previous question, correct?
Yeah.
I think it would depend on, I think we're both under the assumption, Shawndale and I, that you're a Northwest client. I think that was the indicate that your mail would be uploaded to your personal account. If you're using a separate registered agent provider, that would just depend on how they process your mail and what services they provide. But if you're a Northwest client, it would all go directly into your Northwest account.
Shawndale, do you want to elaborate a little bit on how that process works at Northwest as far as if someone has a virtual office and is receiving mail, kind of explain our process here?
Yeah, so anything we receive if you have a virtual office is scanned and uploaded into your Northwest account. You'll receive an email saying we received a document for you. All you would do is go to Northwest's website, log into your client account, and it'll be under your documents section. You can go in there and view it there. You can just view it, you can download it, you can print it. So there's multiple options that you have.
Okay, thanks, Shawndale. Dave, question came in for you. What do I do if I've changed something within my company? I think that means if there's a new company applicant or change a business name or whatever that may look like. What does this person have to do in regards to the BOI report?
So basically, if any of the information you've provided to FinCEN on a BOI report changes, excluding company applicant, you have to provide that change to FinCEN within 30 days. So if the business entity, if the name changes, you have 30 days to update it. If a beneficial owner is removed and replaced, you have to provide that change. If you move, if your personal residence changes and the address you provided and the ID you provided are no longer valid, you'd have to update that information as well. However, FinCEN does not require you, if you were required to provide a company applicant, you do not need to update that information. The reason being, like if you use an attorney to form your entity, the attorney was listed as your company applicant, you don't need to maintain a lifetime relationship with that attorney and get all their information accurate all the time. So that you're off the hook in that regard. But any other change must be reported within 30 days.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. So let's talk exemptions. I know there is a pretty hefty list of exemptions. So Dave, I'm not going to ask you to elaborate on each and every exemption. Maybe just touch on a couple of the big ones and maybe let our folks watching know where they can go to see the whole list of the exemptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me start this with a disclaimer. Although I am an attorney, please don't construe this as legal advice. I do not know how your company works. If these exemptions may apply to you, please do your due diligence to make sure. I'll give you a cursory overview of a few of them. There are 23 total exemptions, but if you think you fall into one of these categories, speak with an attorney, reach out to FinCEN, talk to a professional, because every business is a little different. And although you may think you apply or fall within one of these exemptions, you may not actually be applicable to you. So most of the 23 exemptions really apply to entities that are already subject to some other type of reporting. So if you're subject to the Bank Secrecy Act, like I mentioned, is already policed by FinCEN, you're probably exempt from the BOI report. If you are a publicly traded entity and subject to SEC regulations, you're probably exempt from the BOI report as well. I think the big three that apply probably to most of our clients would be nonprofit entities that are under 501A are tax exempt. If you are a large operating company that has at least 20 employees and $5 million of revenue on your last tax filing, you would be exempt. And if you are a subsidiary of an exempt entity, you would also be exempt. So I think those are probably the big three that we'd see. But again, if you're subject to other reporting requirements, you may be exempt. It's really important to talk to a professional and see if you fall within any of these 23 categories.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. So we had a couple questions come in as you were talking, Dave. Shawndale, I'll direct this one to you. If I only have until the end of the year to file, can I still file with Northwest Registered Agent?
Yes. If you just go to our website and then click on Hire Us, you'll see the option right there in the list of Hire Us options, and we'll be happy to do it for you.
Awesome. That's great. Another question that came in, do I need to report the BOI to FinCEN again if I change my registered agent to a different one sometime next year?
It depends. So the issue here is, was your registered agent's address at all listed on your BOI report? If it wasn't, no update is needed. If like you live overseas, you use your registered agent's address as your principal office address, and then you change registered agents, yes, you'll need to provide FinCEN with an updated address in that regard. But again, depends on your structure, depends what information you provided FinCEN. But if it is just the name of your registered agent, then which is more pertinent on a state record, probably don't need to report it.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Another question, just to confirm, if I have changed, just to confirm, if I have a change of address with a new ID, I can send that to Northwest Registered Agent and they will put it through so I can be compliant.
Yes. So if I understand correctly, they have a new address for their ID that they used when they filed their original report. You can hire Northwest to file an amended report for you. And so then, yes, we can file a new report changing the address connected to your ID so that you are compliant.
Okay, that's really good information. Thanks, Shawndale. So let me see if we have any more questions coming through. It looks like we're up to date on all that. Yeah, I think we're good. So I just want to take a moment to thank both Shawndale and Dave for taking the time to answer some questions and really dive into the Corporate Transparency Act, the BOI Report, FinCEN, all those things. And for those of you watching, if you have a question that pops up maybe later, go ahead and just throw that question in the comment stream, and one of our folks at Northwest Registered Agent will be sure to get back to you with that answer. So before we go offline, I just want to say thanks again to Dave, our legal expert, and Shawndale, our filings guru, for being here. And thank you to all the viewers for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.